Before we begin the agenda, the Wichita-Sedgwick County Metropolitan Area Planning Commission and the Wichita-Sedgwick County Board of Zoning Appeals would like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone to this public hearing. Copies of the agenda for today's meeting, the public hearing procedure, and Planning Department staff reports on all agenda items are available in the lobby of this conference room. The Planning Commission's and the BZA's bylaws limit the applicant on a zoning, subdivision, or variance application and his or her representative to a total of 10 minutes of speaking time at the start of the hearing on that item, plus up to 2 minutes at the conclusion of that hearing. All other persons wishing to speak on agenda items are limited to 3 minutes per person. However, if they feel that it is needed and justified, the chairman may extend these times by up to 2 minutes. All speakers are requested to state his or her name and address for the record when beginning to speak. When you are finished speaking, please write your name, address, and the case number on the sheet provided in the lobby. This will enable staff to notify you if there are any additional proceedings concerning that item. Please note that all written and visual materials you present to the Commission and the Board will be retained by the Secretary as part of the official record. If you are not speaking but you wish to be notified about future proceedings on a particular case, please sign in on that same sheet. The Planning Commission and the Board are interested in hearing the views of all persons who wish to express themselves on the agenda items. However, we ask that all speakers please be as concise as possible and avoid long repetitions of facts or opinions which have already been stated. For your information, the Wichita City Council has adopted a policy for all city zoning items. A copy of this policy is available in the lobby. The City Council relies on a written record of the Planning Commission hearings and does not conduct its own additional public hearings on these items. The decision of the BZA is final. Any appeal of a decision of the BZA is to district court.
Okay, to start off with, there were no cases, no minutes, so there will be no meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals. Put that on the back burner. First item of business is the approval of the minutes of November 21st. Is there a motion?
Second.
Moved by Mr. McKay, second by Mr. Green. My record shows that everybody was here except Mr. Florence. So all in favor of the motion signify with the raised hand. Opposed, same sign. How many? 13, 0, and 1. Next, we will go through the agenda to see what items we can take by consent. The first item to consider, agenda item 2.1, a one-step final plat, property located on the east side of South 407th Street. Anybody on the commission wish to hear that item? Is there anybody in the audience that wish to hear that item? Is there a hand up in the foyer that wants to hear that item? We do. We will hear item 2.1. Item 2.2, one-step final plat, Eck Brothers Estate Edition. Anybody on the commission wish to hear that item? Is there anybody in the audience that would like to hear that item? Anybody out in the foyer? Okay, we'll take that by consent. Next item is 2.3, one-step final plat, Maker Space Edition. Anybody on the commission wish to hear that item? Seeing none, anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? Anybody in the foyer? Take that by consent. Is there a motion?
Move to approve item number 2.2 and 2.3.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Miles, a second by Mr. Hartman. All those in favor signify with the raised hand. Passes unanimously. No public hearings out for vacations. Next will be item 4.1. We will hear that one, so we will move on to item 4.2. A county conditional use for a training kennel, approximately half mile south of East 39th Street. Anybody on the commission wish to hear that item? Anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? We will hear item 4.2. Item 4.3, conditional use to allow for outdoor vehicle and equipment sales. We will hear that item. Item 4.4, I have a mark on there that we'll hear that. I can't remember when I did that. Is there anybody in the commission want to hear that item? Anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? Yes. We will hear item 4.4. Item 4.5, planned unit development, city zone change from general commercial to multifamily. Anybody on the commission wish to hear that item? Seeing none, is there anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? Anybody in the foyer? Seeing none, we will take that by 4.5 by consent. Item 4.6, city zone change from a central business district to a PUD. Anybody on the commission wish to hear that item? Anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? Anybody in the foyer? We will take 4.6 by consent. 4.7 we will hear. 4.8, city zone change from single family to multifamily. Anybody on the commission wish to hear item 4.8? Seeing none, anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? Anybody in the foyer? Yes, we will hear 4.8. Next item, agenda item 4.9, a city zone change from single family to the Delano overlay to a two-family property. Anybody on the commission wish to hear that item? Seeing none, anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? Anybody in the foyer? We'll take 4.9 by consent. And the last item on the agenda is item 4.10, the city zone change from single-family residential to TF3. Anybody on the planning commission wish to hear that item? Anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? Yeah, we have one in the foyer. We will hear item 4.10.
Motion to approve 4.5, 4.6, and 4.9.
We have a motion by Mr. Blick, a second by Ms. Miles. Those in favor signify with the raised hand. Those opposed, motion carries unanimously. Before we go start hearing our first item, have a couple of things for both the commission and the audience. Remember that to speak directly into the microphone and push the button when you need to speak so we can be heard from that standpoint. If you wish to speak on an item that we have coming forward, be sure to state your name and address for the record when you come forward. If you're going to if you want to show us something on the screen, be sure and use the computer and the mouse that is at the stand. And if you need any help with that, staff will be more than willing to come up and help you to use that. We can't hear you when you go to the screen itself, so please try to avoid going to the screen, but use the computer and the mouse right there. And then lastly, due to the large number of items that we have on the agenda and the number of people that want to speak, I'm going to advise you that do not expect any extensions. Whatever time you have allowed to you, you will be given that time, but I do not anticipate offering too many extensions, if any, today. So try to get this moving as quickly as we can. With that, the first item that we will hear is subdivision 2019-00049.
Neil Straw, planning staff. This item is the S&B's first edition. It's located on the east side of 407th Street West, north of 23rd Street South, located in the county. The plat encompasses 3 lots. Zoning is RR, rural residential. Was reviewed at our subdivision committee last week. Subsequent to last week's meeting, the applicant has submitted an updated plat, which I did send to our subdivision committee members. The updated plat did identify the drainage easement on Lot 3 as a floodway reserve as requested in item D. Also, access controls requested in item F along 407th. were platted, which included a joint access easement between lots 1 and 2 and an opening for lot 3 south of the floodway reserve. No other updates. Any questions for staff?
Any questions for staff? Seeing none, agent and applicant, we will have 10 minutes.
Dan Garber with Garber Surveying Service, 2908 North Plum Street, Hutchinson. We concur with all the staff comments we have made. I believe we've addressed all the comments, made the revisions. And we did widen out the floodway reserve to 40 feet instead of 20 feet, just in the last couple of days. I would stand for any questions.
Any questions for the speaker? Seeing none, thank you. Is there anybody from the audience wish to hear this, speak on this item? You will have 3 minutes. Yeah. Anybody in the foyer like to speak on this item? If not, we'll bring it back to the commission.
Move for approval. Second.
Motion to approve by Mr. McKay, second by Mr. Green. Those in favor signify with the raised hand. Those opposed, passes unanimously.
Mr. Chairman, because there's so many people here, can we not postpone it, but not take it first, unless there's a bunch of people here to talk on it? South Central. Well, it's a question more than a motion.
It should be in the way of a motion if you're going to alter the agenda.
You want to move that to the
Well, I'd like
end?
to make a motion, put this at the end.
Move that in. There's a motion second to move
McKay and Miles.
McKay and Miles, and that is item 4.1. Those in favor of the motion signify with the raised hand. Passes unanimously. Item 4.1. Item that we may want to do, we've got 2 items that are county items, item 4.2 and 4.7. I would be interested to see if we would be entertaining a motion to put those together in the agenda. Motion by Ms. Miles, is there a second?
Second.
Second, all those in favor raise their hand. Okay, we will start with 4.2. Next up.
Miles and Dual.
Excuse me. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Philip Zievenbergen with Planning Staff. Item 4.2 is a conditional use for the applicant to continue operating a training facility on her personal property located in the county. It's addressed as 9025 East 42nd Street South, which is about 3/4 of a mile east of South Rock Road, about a half mile south of East 39th Street South, which is East MacArthur Road. The property is zoned SF20, single family, and it occupies about 4 1/2 acres in size. The applicant is a certified professional dog trainer. She's been training for 12 years. She's been operating out of this location since July of 2017. She is seeking the conditional use after she was cited from a zoning and nuisance inspector who instructed her to do so. The code puts a training facility underneath the kennel use category, which is defined as a premises having 5 or more adult dogs, or 3 or more of those do not belong to the owner, or any premise that has 10 or more adult dogs. The code does allow this in the SF20 district under a conditional use. It also provides additional supplementary use regulations that it would have to follow. In general, those supplementary use regulations talk about how the minimum lot size should be 5 acres unless all the animals are harbored inside and there are no noise or odor at the property lines. Any outside runs, holding pens, or open air enclosures need to be at least 200 feet from any neighboring dwelling unit and at least 50 feet from contiguous property lines. And that a solid screening requirement is there to provide that you cannot see any activities or see any of the animals from any contiguous property lines. All of the details of those screening requirements are provided in your staff reports. I won't go into all the details for the sake of time. The applicant currently conducts group training sessions in an accessory structure This is her main residence here. She conducts all the training sessions in an accessory structure that is opposite of her house, and in the middle there's a paved courtyard that has actual ample room for parking for all of these training sessions. The classes have 6 sessions that run year-round with a 1 or 2 week break in between. The classes during the week have a specific schedule I'll get into in just a second, and each class can have up to 6 dogs. The dogs are only on the premises for the time of their training. Once the training session is over, their owners take them home. In general, the classes range from 45 minutes to an hour in length. There are 4 classes that are held 2 days a week in the evening, with up to 2 classes at 6 p.m. and 7:30. Additionally, there is a 1 to 2 classes held 4 days per week at 9 and 1, or both, depending on how many classes are scheduled. An additional 2 to 4 classes are held on the weekends, with 1 to 2 classes each day, starting at 8 and 9:30. So on a weekday, the highest number of classes you could have would be 4, with 2 in the morning, or 2 in the morning and 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, and then 2 in the evening, if those days coincided with each other. That's just to help give you an idea to the breadth of what could happen on any individual day. She indicated that the class times are dependent upon the season, as there are certain times of year where business is a little slower than others, so there's not always that many classes going on all at the same time. All the classes are held inside except for the loose leash walking class, which is held outside in an enclosed dog run, and that happens for 2 weeks out of the 4-week session, and it is only held 1 time per year. Though that class is outside, the dogs are required to remain silent, and she is with them in the enclosure the entire time. The applicant would like to add additional services to her business in the future. She would like to provide dog socialization sessions where they take groups of dogs, upwards of 6, into an area to help them socialize and learn good behavior around other dogs. She proposes to have 1 to 2 classes per week for that type of a session. Additionally, she would like to have a board and train option for up to 4 dogs, where it may be more convenient for the dog owner to board the dog while it is being trained, and she was requesting up to 4 dogs for that. The boarding and training would be held exclusively inside. None of the dogs would be boarded outside. And she would, if they were being brought outside at any time, she'd be accompanying them, and it'd only be for potentially the loose leash training session or to relieve themselves. And these boarded dogs were not counted in the dogs that we've already talked about with her training session, because it currently does not happen. As I mentioned before, the applicant's property is 4.5 acres, which does not meet the supplementary use regulation standard of 5. The applicant is requesting a waiver of this minimum lot size. We have a site plan in here. Sorry for the image of it, but this is the applicant's house. This is the applicant's training area. These are the distances to contiguous property lines as well as neighboring houses, and as you can see, all of those conditions are met. None of the houses or the property lines are within the 200 feet or 50-foot distance, so she's in compliance with that at this time. There is let me get here to a picture here. I'll go through these back in just a second. There is a dog run on the back of her property that is fenced in on 2 sides, and her house acts as a barrier on the north. It has a wrought iron fence on the south side. This is the designated dog run that she would be using for her training. With the south side not being a solid fence, it does not meet the screening requirement. She's actually asking for a waiver for that as well, because the property south of them is undeveloped agricultural land, as you can see from the aerial, and felt that since there are no actual dwelling units south of the property, that she would request that waiver be, for that screening would be waived. If that is denied, then the proper screening would have to be installed. Properties to the north, east, and west are zoned single-family SF20, and as you can see, are single-family homes with properties about the same size, if not larger. Property to the south, as I mentioned, is zoned single-family 20, is undeveloped agricultural land. East 42nd Street South is a paved gravel local street with 70 feet of right-of-way and a 25-foot bidirectional travel lane. East 39th Street South, which is actually outside of the map here, but East MacArthur Road is up here. It is a 2-lane paved county arterial. The property is in Rural Water District 3, and it has septic sewer with lagoons for utilities. According to the comprehensive plan, this site is suitable for residential uses. Per the zoning code, a conditional use can allow a kennel and training facility with a conditional use. With the supplementary use regulations, in order to have those regulations waived, as I've discussed before, would take a recommendation from this board and final approval from the county commission. Staff is recommending approval of this case subject to several conditions. A good chunk of those conditions are pretty standard for any dog kennel or training facility that we have. I'll kind of touch on them, but I'll focus on the ones that are unique to this case. Specifically, we would allow up to 10 dogs at any given time for a training session, in addition to the 4 dogs if she were to do the board and train option. All dogs would have to be accompanied outdoors at all times. Dogs would only be outdoors for the duration of the appropriate training session or to relieve themselves. And no dog shall be boarded outdoors overnight. She is requesting the waiver of the minimum lot size as well as the south screening requirement. Some of the pretty standard ones are the cleanliness and operation of the kennel, following all state, local, and federal regulations. All waste material would have to be disposed of in a manner to minimize odor and disease. We are putting a time limit on this. We're requesting that this be for 5 years only, and upon such, she would have to submit for reevaluation by administrative adjustment. Let me see here. There have been quite a few, I've had quite a few conversations with neighbors in the area, kind of a mixed bag of being in support and not being in support, or kind of on the fence with this. At your desk, you do have a packet of information, which is quite a few emails that we have received, most of them vying for support of this case. There is one particular email I want to mention where the individual wanted to note that he is in favor of the training facility. However, he is not in favor of the boarding facility and was requesting that you guys make the decision to not include that as part of this case. With regard to impact of proposed community facilities, this obviously would create a little bit additional traffic on the streets. However, the local streets and East MacArthur should be sufficient to handle the case. And with that, I can stand for any staff questions.
Any questions, Philip? The only question I have is the waiver on the fencing to the screening to the south. Is it possible to do that until such time as that becomes developed? Can we put a condition on that?
Yes, you can.
We could leave it for now, but if that area is developed with the property within,
Yes.
would we do that by distance or just anything to the south? How would we?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Basically, the question is if we were to allow for the waiver of the screening, but require it if at a future date the property to the south was developed, would we identify that by distance, or how could we identify what would trigger the need for screening?
I think there's a few ways you could possibly do that. I think it could be a reasonable condition. One, as you mentioned, you could have a distance requirement. I think you could also, I mean, it's worth noting this is a 5-year time frame that it's limited to. But you could say if the property would be platted for multiple lots of residential development, perhaps, or something along those lines, if that's what the concern of the Planning Commission would be. I'd be open to any comments Dale has on additional ways in which you could address that.
One approach would be to say if there's a residence that is developed within 300 feet, whatever the existing distance is now, and just go with that.
Additional questions for staff? Ms. Miles?
Philip, can you tell me, I noticed as I'm reading through these emails that people mention about a doggy daycare. Can you tell me, has there been complaints in the past regarding having dogs there throughout the day?
I can definitely defer to the applicant. She could probably speak a little bit more to my understanding in conversations with the applicant, that she has actually pared back her business to help address complaints from her neighbors with the intention of wanting to be a good neighbor as well as continue to operate her business. I believe she does not do doggy daycare at this time, but I can defer to her to clarify.
Any additional questions for Philip? Thank you. Would the agent or applicant like to come forward And state your name and address for the record, and you have 10 minutes.
Hi, I'm Doreen Hardiman, and I live at 9025 East 42nd Street South in Derby. May I just continue? Okay. I'm the owner and operator of Canine Kudos Dog Training, and I'd like to start by giving you an explanation of my business. Canine Kudos serves the Wichita metro area and surrounding communities of Derby, Rose Hill, Andover, Mulvane, Hayesville, and others. I specialize in obedience training, thank you, therapy dog certification, community education, and pet CPR and first aid. I'm nationally certified trainer by several organizations and have been training dogs for over 12 years. Our private and group programs offer 100% force-free, fear-free, positive reinforcement training, fostering a fun and educational environment for both the handler and their dog. This means that our techniques do not use force, fear, shock, choke, or prong collars, or intimidation methods. We teach dog owners how dogs learn, what they're telling us with their body language, and we inform owners of positive ways to motivate their dog to offer the desired behaviors. Group sessions are limited to 4 participants in each class, and I have a professional database that notifies me of any vaccinations that are expired. And I actually require more than the county asks for. I also require distemper parvo and the bordetella, which is for kennel cough. Dogs are always contained on my property, and I do not breed dogs, and I don't intend to. My accreditations include certifications from the Animal Behavior College, where I earned high honors, and I was recently chosen to be a mentor for them as well. I'm a licensed Family Paws parent educator, a national certified trick dog trainer, and I teach pet CPR and first aid for dogs and cats. I was recently accepted into the Academy for Dog Trainers, and they're regarded as the Harvard of dog training, and they offer one of the most rigorous and advanced programs in dog training and behavior in the world. One of my passions is to help people understand their family dogs so that they can enjoy life together. Proper training and integration of dogs into homes creates safer environments and helps dogs stay with their family and not be relinquished to a shelter or rescue. Studies also find that homes with pets are happier and healthier than those without. Ideally, clients start our programs when the puppy is introduced into the home. It is critical to start the socialization process within the learning window, which is between 8 to 16 weeks old. However, I am just as passionate to help people with older and timid or fearful dogs. Once owners are educated, they change their approach in training, and this helps the dogs learn more efficiently, trust their owners more, and overcome their fears. The benefits that my clients experience are not limited to their own homes. Many clients carry their educations into the communities and schools, and many times share what they've learned with others they're close with. This knowledge dissemination benefits communities as a whole and making the human-dog interaction safer, healthier, and more fun as a result. We also want to fill every nursing home, hospital, and school with therapy dogs from the area, and we have a network of therapy dogs in case of a disaster. I'm also passionate about dog safety and children. 77% of dog bites come from a family or friend's dog, and that means these aren't crazy, stray, or vicious dogs. There are family pets. With Stop the 77 campaign in mind, I offer community service classes to the surrounding schools, and I teach children about dog body language, when it's okay to pet a dog, what to do if a dog wants to hurt them, and when not to approach a dog, and much, much more. This type of education helps prevent unnecessary dog bites and has even helped children that are fearful of dogs overcome their fears. And while teaching these classes, adults in the room are listening and learning as well. I'd like to also address the complaints and concerns that have been submitted to the county. They are noise, traffic, and possible reduction in property values. So with noise and traffic, first I'd like to note that we have never received a single noise complaint from the police or from any of our neighbors since we opened in 2017. And upon receiving the complaint from the county, we immediately shut down our doggy daycare. This was not originally part of the services I offered. It was added based on the high demand of clients for a safe and trusted place for dogs to socialize and play. Daycare was only offered 1 to 2 days per week, and we had a drop-off of 7 to 10 a.m. and pick up from 3 to 6 p.m. Closing the daycare service alleviated traffic by more than 50% and reduced all of the noise associated. Our private and group classes are primarily indoors and are limited to 4 participants. Weather permitting, the loose leash walking, as stated before, has 2 of the 4 lessons outside in a contained area. Also included in our obedience class is to help teach dogs to reduce barking while playing and alarm barking at other people and dogs and animals. Before any classes are taken, I require an orientation. In 2018, I added into my orientation to avoid Cypress Street if possible and to drive slowly in the neighborhood to appease the neighbor to the east of my property. Unfortunately, it seems that people who live in this neighborhood, delivery people, and service companies all drive really fast down that street. Property values, in regards to that, our facility is a converted 2,100 square foot detached garage building that matches the color and design of our personal residence. We have also completely upgraded the exterior of our residence as well. The interior of the facility has been renovated to have a reception area, training room, office, and storage space. The training room has been finished and upgraded to include state-of-the-art noise dampening insulation, flooring, and ceiling dampers. The yards used for the loose leash walking and for dogs to relieve themselves are professionally fenced and maintained in top order for both appearance and safety. Improvements made to the property have increased the property's tax value over $100,000 within the last 2 years. We have spoke with several immediate neighbors to our property, with the main concern coming from the terminology of the application. We explained to them the difference between a zoning change and a conditional use, and they have also reached out to Philip in regards to this. Neighboring properties have been verbally supportive of our business on the property. In closing, I hope you'll take this information into consideration in approving the application for the conditional use regarding the Canine Kudos dog training facility. The business is my passion and provides benefits to surrounding communities that go well beyond the walls of our building. I feel that we have been sensitive to the complaint and concern of our neighbor, and we have already made changes to address these. And that summarizes who I am and what my business involves.
Questions for the speaker? Mr. Richardson?
So my understanding is, and I believe, Philip, it's a staff recommendation that daycare is not included in the recommended approval. Do I understand that correctly?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Additional questions? Mr. Hartman?
Are you in agreement with the staff recommendations?
Pardon me?
I said, are you in agreement with the staff recommendations?
Yes.
Any additional questions?
I guess the additional question that I would have, it says here in the recommendations in item number 1, it says in the first sentence, a conditional use shall permit a kennel, boarding, breeding, training for up to 10 dogs at any given time for training sessions, in addition up to 4 dogs for boarding. So would that not be considered a doggy daycare? That's just not overnight, or can you clarify that for me, please?
That would be deleted from the conditions, the development standards. If she can't have it, then we'd remove it.
Any additional questions?
Well, there was a
Mr.
question
McKay?
about the fence on the south side. I don't think that's been taken care of. She said she agreed to everything.
You heard the part where I was talking about requiring screening if property was developed to the south?
Yes.
Okay, you okay with that?
Yeah, we're actually thinking of doing some berms back there anyway, so.
Okay, thank you. If there are no other questions, we'll ask if there's anybody from the audience that would like to speak on this issue. Okay, just come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record. You will have 3 minutes. However, brevity is appreciated.
My name is Larry Gutzmer, 9129 East 42nd Street South. I live next door to this. As you all can contend, there's 2 sides to every story. I have 16 signed complaints opposing this. There has been numerous communications with these people about their issues. The people to the south that own the land are opposing it. Everybody to the east is opposing it. Everybody to the west is opposing it. People to the north are opposing it. We have a huge traffic issue. We have kids getting on and off our buses every morning and every night, and these cars are coming through all the time. We have water issues. She's been operating this business for 2 years without a permit. And I understand what she does is good. I'm not contending that she's not qualified for what she's doing, but where she's doing it at is not presentable to our addition. I'm an original owner, developer of this property. I moved in when it was grass, and we like to keep our sounds. It's a rural area. We like to keep things nice and quiet, and we prefer to keep it this way. I've addressed lagoon issues. She subleased her buildings to people. We've had lagoon issues of seeping and overflowing, which has killed one of my trees, and I have affidavits for that, if somebody would like to see that. But in perspective, our housing addition is against this boarding training facility that is here, because that is basically what she runs, is a boarding most of the time. And the fence on the west or on the east side, I have a picture on my phone I can show you. There's at least 7 dogs in that kennel for almost the full period of the day. The people to the west of her have complained of barking nonstop, which I didn't know about till a couple weeks ago. So where her information is coming from, I have no idea, but these 16 petitions to cease this business, or to not allow this business, are in my hand, which will be transferred over. So that's basically about anything I can say to be opposing this. If somebody has any questions, they can.
Just to make sure, protest petitions need to be filed with the city clerk following a final act, I mean, the county clerk.
Yeah, after this, yes.
Yeah, okay, I just want to make sure.
Dale, can you clarify the distance for those, for anybody who might be interested to hear how far away you can sign a protest petition?
Well, anybody could sign the protest petition, but only those property owners located within 1,000 feet impact the supermajority vote requirement.
And we have those.
Terrell?
Yeah, you mentioned a parking problem. What are we talking about? Are they parking on the street or?
No, I didn't. We haven't complained about a parking problem. They have their parking between their 2 houses, between their outhouse, their facility, and their house. One of the screens that they had up, you showed that they were training out the back of their house. They're actually training out of the garage that's detached, which is farther to the east, and boarding dogs and housing dogs farther to the east of that, on top of that.
Okay, additional questions for the speaker? Mr. Richardson?
So, saying that there are dogs outside on the east side of the training facility in the fenced yard for a long period of time?
Yes, sir. We had a Sunday 3 weeks ago that the dogs barked from, say, about 8:30 in the morning, because I was working outside my pasture, till at least 5:30 or 6 in the evening, nonstop. And we have actually my wife on her phone has one from a week ago Saturday, from Saturday all day, standing on our back porch, which is 600 feet, 700 feet from their property, of the dogs barking from then.
Additional questions? Thank you, sir. Next speaker, please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record.
My name is Malia Gutzmer. My address is 9129 East 42nd Street. I live right next door to the kennel or the business that's being suggested here. And I'm not going to repeat everything that he just said. That's what was my husband. But I do want to let you know that, again, we are not against her business, the type of business that she has, her training. I think it's a great thing that she does. It's just the fact that it's being done in our neighborhood. It does increase the traffic down our streets. As he said, we have children getting on buses at 7 o'clock in the morning, which is when people are bringing their dogs and dropping them off. She says she's not going to do doggy daycare, but she has been doing that up until now, so I'm not really sure what's going to make her change. She also says that she has not been boarding dogs, but we personally know people who have boarded their dogs there. So I do know that those things are happening, and it's a frustration to the entire neighborhood. She maybe has a couple people in the neighborhood who are involved with her business, and so therefore they are for her business. But we are directly to the east, the house directly to the west, the house directly across the street to the north have all signed these petitions asking that this not be opened, or that it not be allowed, and that the zoning change not occur. Our other concern is the fact that if you approve this and it becomes zoned the way she wants it to, does this open the door for other businesses to come into this neighborhood and and change the zoning, which is not why we moved out to the country on a 5-acre lot. We did not move to a residential area that had businesses around it for that specific reason, and most of the people in that area did not move to that either. So we would encourage you to think about that, take that all into consideration before you make your vote.
Thank you. I'll let staff answer that question first.
The zoning will remain the same. A conditional use does not change the zoning. The way the zoning code is set up, a conditional use, if approved, allows an additional use upon specific review. As far as future businesses, each case is evaluated on its own as an individual case. The basic rule is similarly situated properties have to be treated the same.
Okay, so someone else could come in and operate something else.
Additional questions for the speaker? Mr. Foster?
Do you happen to know if the development has any restrictive covenants that address business uses in the neighborhood?
The development originally, when it was first developed, did have covenants that restricted those types of a retail business or any kind of commercial business to be operated out of the home. Yes, there were covenants in place. Those covenants now are no longer in place because of the length of time and the fact that we don't have a homeowners association any longer in that area, and the original developer is not involved any longer with the area. So those covenants have not been put in place. But when I bought my home, and when several of the homeowners around us bought their homes or built their homes out there, those covenants were in place that there would not be any kind of business there.
Additional questions for the speaker? Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Can I ask her a question?
No?
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Ann Thompson, and my property is located, I don't know how to move that. Can you help me move the map? So depending on where you draw the lines,
There you go.
I need to go down there. Is that possible?
You can just move the mouse to show, like
Okay.
the map can't move.
Okay, so my property, if you were to draw a line right here to this corner, this is my property right here. And so I'm a neighbor to the south of Canine Kudos. I'm here in support of Canine Kudos and Doreen Hardiman's business. Never once have we been bothered by her dog training facility, the barking, the noise. I also have children that ride the bus, and depending on the time of day and people leaving for work, you have to watch for traffic regardless, even in my neighborhood. So that's just part of life. And it's my understanding that there are several businesses in their neighborhood, to include the neighbors that have complained. They own their own business as well out of their home. But my experience with the company and Doreen has been nothing short of wonderful. I found Doreen through high recommendations of friends. And we've been regarded as riffraff. I will tell you, my husband's a colonel in the United States Air Force. Some of their clients are owner-operators of Chick-fil-A in Wichita. We're not riffraff by any means. I'm an accounting professor. And we sought Doreen out because we got a puppy for the first time in our 13 years of marriage and didn't socialize him properly and found some negative behaviors. And after talking to those friends of ours, they suggested Doreen, and we've seen amazing results. My children feel safer with his behavior. I feel safer with others as well coming to our home. And she does nothing but lovingly and professionally provide that training. So I just want to say I'm also a neighbor of hers, and the issues that they describe we have not experienced.
Any questions for the speaker? Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Waynetta Hall. I live at 1775 South George Washington Boulevard, and I have basically a business relationship with Doreen. I have 2 dogs and was having some behavior issues, and my vet from Mulvane Animal Hospital, who I've been a client of since 1995, highly recommended Doreen. I was out to her facility several times. I was blown away by how clean, how fresh, how wonderfully laid out it was. It's set up for the safety of the dogs, safety of the humans. Was out there just different odd times. There was never very many dogs there. Our class was limited to 4 dogs. When we went through the orientation, we were told very explicitly that it was to be kept quiet. Our dogs were always to be leashed. We were to clean up after each other. In fact, Doreen, during classes, if there is something that she needs to clean up, she cleans it up there. She keeps cleaning supplies on hand. The building was converted from a garage to a really wonderful facility. It is soundproof. It has wonderfully rubber floors. It's clean. It's nice. And I would love to have a facility. I would love to have a neighbor like Doreen. She is very nice. She's very professional. It's a passion. It's something that she does from her heart. And as a person who frequently rescues stray dogs running down the street, dogs that have been starved to death, dogs that have been hit, we need more people like Doreen. I absolutely 100% positively cannot understand why anyone would not consider Doreen a wonderful neighbor, a wonderful business owner, and someone that Wichita City, Kansas City, the United States needs to support. We throw money all the time at the problem. We don't throw money at the solutions. We've got a lady right over here that's trying to get us solutions to get the dogs not to bite, to get better owners, to get better dogs. Let's not stop that. Let's just support her. Let's support her as much as we can. And I was out there. I never heard and overheard a bunch of dogs barking. That's all I have to say.
Questions for the speaker? Thank you. Next speaker, please.
My name is Brett Woodorff. I live at 2236 East Tall Tree Circle in Derby. It's not in this neighborhood here. My relationship with Doreen and Canine Kudos is that of, I'm a former client of hers. We took our dog all the way through the individual puppy classes and well-mannered dog classes. Initially, when we got our dog, he was very kind of timid and scared of other people and other animals. And through Doreen's classes and socialization events, we were able to have him overcome that. And he's now getting ready to be tested to become a therapy dog to be shared with others in the community. We've practiced at a local nursing home. And you wouldn't believe the smiles and the bright eyes that people get when you bring animals like these into these facilities. These are people that typically don't get a whole lot of visitors. And so somebody coming to see them, let alone bringing them an animal that makes them smile and makes their day brighter, is amazing. So we'd like to be able to share those dogs and be able to have a facility within the community that provides this to other citizens, that allows them to do it here and not go to other neighboring areas like Hutchinson or Oklahoma City to do this. I don't know of any other facilities like Doreen's that have 100% force-free methods and techniques where you're not intimidating the dogs, you're not using, detriments to the animal to get the behavior that you want. You're using positive and fun ways of training the animals. Along with nursing homes, we'd like to be able to share our dog once certified with other veterans hospitals and stuff so that we can go make the days brighter of so many that give so much for our country and for our safety. And like I said, just to be able to see their eyes brighten up and to see the smiles on their faces is amazing. And so if we can share that with them and we can share our family animal with him, it's a blessing to us, and it's a blessing to have a facility like Doreen's in the neighborhood that we can actually go to and we can do this. Now, some of the concerns that I've heard in here, I know that we were also a former client of the Doggy Daycare initially when she started offering these services. Those services are no longer being offered. We're not bringing our animal to Doreen for that anymore. I do know that a couple of times with those drop-off times are right around the times when kids are being picked up by buses, but with the times I heard earlier about 9 a.m., 1 p.m., and in the evening, those are times that kids are not being dropped off in the neighborhood by buses. And so the traffic that's been reduced at those times shouldn't be a concern for that. I don't think I have any other points. I just would like to support the application.
Questions for the speaker? Thank you. Next speaker, please. You have 3 minutes, but again, brevity is appreciated.
Hi, my name's Jerry Dale. I live at 413 West Whitetail, Derby, Kansas. I am here to support Doreen and Canine Kudos. My wife and I, we adopted a dog that had been dropped in 12 inches of snow in the middle of Winter Storm Harper in northern Missouri. Her name is Harper. She was shy, timid, scared. We met Doreen through our chiropractor who had taken their dog there, became a therapy dog. We have went through 3 classes. We're waiting on the next one to start. Our goal is to eventually become a therapy dog. We can now take our dog to outdoor eating establishments without fear. One eating establishment in Old Town has even taken her picture, put it on their Instagram page. None of this could be possible without Doreen and her facility. We used to take her to socialize once a week. As soon as his complaint was filed, we were informed that that would no longer be offered. To shut down something like this would be insane. And if you guys want to see traffic, try McIntosh in Derby. You know, we got people running 70 miles an hour down that street. So I'd trade that traffic any day. Thank you.
Questions for the speaker? Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Paula Kim. I live at 112 East Stone Creek in Derby. I'm also in support of Doreen and Canine Kudos. I have a 2-year-old dog that has went all the way through Doreen's training, even before she had her facility. We started with her, continued on. She is now a therapy dog, and I manage a dental office, and she goes to work with me every day. We've had patients that can't have treatment. They're scared to death to sit in a dental chair. And because of my dog and the training that Doreen did, they are able to proceed with their treatment. And it's not just kids, it's adults too. We've had adults literally in a fetal position, and my dog has been trained by Doreen, and so she walked up to that patient, and the patient was able to lay back and have their dental treatment. I agree. I recommended the speaker, 2 speakers before me, to use Canine Kudos. Our dogs are siblings, and the benefit of the facility is amazing. It's clean, like other people have stated. It's unfortunate that untruths have been told about the facility. I agree that the doggy daycare is shut down, so all of those concerns are no longer an issue. Doreen, my dog, is also going to be going to schools and hospitals. We've been to nursing homes multiple times, which I felt like I would never enjoy that environment. And the first time we went in, and my dog helped these older people just their whole life, just their eyes just lit up because of my dog. So we're hooked on that. None of that would have been possible without Doreen. So I know the person that spoke first after Doreen said that they don't want it's not about her training, but without her facility, the training wouldn't be possible. There's so much that she offers to the community, and it would be a shame to not have that provided. It keeps our dogs out of shelters. It saves money in that regard. I can't speak highly enough of her business, so completely support it.
Any questions for the speaker? Thank you. Before I ask if there are any other speakers, how many in the audience are in support of the issue? Okay. How many are in the audience are opposed? Okay. For those of you that are in support, if your testimony is pretty much a repeat that you like the business but don't have anything to add in regards to the physical aspect of the things that we have to deal with, really appreciate you keep it just a bare minimum. I mean, we appreciate that testimony, but it's the same thing over and over again. So next speaker, please. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the applicant. You will have 2 minutes for rebuttal.
First of all, the lagoon. When we moved in, the lagoon was not done correctly, so we had to have it redone. Has nothing really to do with my business. Whether I had a business or not, that lagoon needed to be fixed, so we fixed it. It leaked. We got it fixed within 2 weeks of finding out that it leaked. So that, I just don't even understand why that was brought up. I do not board dogs. I shut all of that down, so there's no worries about that. The neighbor to the west of us did talk to us the other day about noise. It was actually my personal dogs. At 6:30 in the morning, they go outside and they play, and they bark when they play. So since then, not one bark. I've been letting them only go out with the dogs I know that won't bark together. So I'm taking care of that because I do want to be a good neighbor. And so I'm not really worried about that. I don't know what he was talking about, water issues, unless it was the lagoon. Also, many people in our neighborhood have businesses, including the guy who was complaining. So I just don't understand how he can complain about me when he has run his business out of his house for 45 years. Okay. Oh, the Sunday barking was not anything to do with my business. It was a party I had with my family and friends. I don't work on Sundays. And then the Saturday was also a personal party. It was a completely different weekend. So yes, I do have parties with friends that come over, and we're not gonna let our dogs bark continuously like that. That's just ridiculous. Yeah, they do bark, because dogs bark, but we do work with them and get them to be quiet. So those 2 days didn't have anything to do with my business. That was my personal friends and family coming over. That's it.
Questions for the applicant? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Bring it back to the commission. Mr. Richardson.
It's a question for Philip. Under your conditions for approval, the last sentence on number 1 says, "No dog shall be boarded overnight." That seemed to be in conflict with the applicant requesting to have 4 dogs in residence there.
Hold on, I'm finding, I think it was outdoors overnight. They could be boarded overnight, but just not boarded outdoors. On properties that have 5 acres or more, they can board dogs overnight. And if she were to get the waiver for the minimum lot requirement, she would have been able to do so as well. However, she was, it sounds like the boarding has been taken out of this. But if boarding would have been allowed, we would not have allowed them to be boarded outdoors overnight.
So we're clear, is the applicant in agreement with taking the boarding out? Is that right?
Yes.
Mr. Hartman?
I have a question. It says that all dogs shall be accompanied outdoors at all times. Now, how do we know if it's her personal dogs outdoors or if it's part of her business?
I don't know if we can clarify that. Looks like Dale has a comment.
And that'd be for the applicant.
Well, I'd be happy to address that,
Okay.
Chairman. To a degree, I think, I don't see any county animal control staff here, but there is a licensing requirement for dogs in the unincorporated area. So the owner would have to license any of her dogs, and there would be a somewhat detailed description of each of those dogs. So in the event of a code complaint, if our staff would receive it, I imagine they get a hold of Sedgwick County Animal Control, figure out which dogs are licensed and owned by the property owner. That's probably the closest way you could track that.
That answer your question, Mr. Hartman?
So according to the way this is written, she can have dogs outdoors unaccompanied if they're her own.
Correct. I mean,
Yes.
I don't remember, Philip, maybe you remember, but how many dogs can she legally have of her own that don't require conditional use?
Well, the definition of a kennel allows up to 10 adult dogs. It says a premises of 5 or more adult dogs where 3 or more are owned by some other, or a premises has 10 or more adult dogs.
Mr. Richardson?
So without the kennel though, I think the question is, how many dogs can you have in the county? I know there's a limit in the city. I don't know what the county reg is.
To my knowledge, I'm not aware of any limitation on the number of dogs you can have in the unincorporated area. If you do have, we do have nuisance animal charges. So if your dogs are barking incessantly, there can be charges that be filed in our county court for that type of action. And if they're not being maintained and treated appropriately.
Okay, additional questions? Mr. Foster?
Philip, want to understand on page 5 of the staff report, it's referring to the screening. If fencing is used, it shall not be less than 4, no more than 8 feet in height. The 4 foot seems.
That should be 6. I don't.
Okay, I was going to say that seems very inappropriate to me.
No, that should be 6.
Okay.
The code definitely says 6, and I thought I lifted this out of the code, but I apologize that was stated incorrectly.
And I do have a question for one of the speakers, if I may. The gentleman to the east, could you come to the podium, please?
Yes, sir.
As a conditional use, you can see that quite a few conditions are being placed on this if approval is considered. My question is, describe the needs for screening along that east side.
It's not the need for screening because as you're aware, David, that when you put wood fence up, it amplifies as a speaker. So any noise you have inside a wooded area will actually be louder than it would be if it's softened by the trees or the grass that it comes through. So if putting a fence up there is not going to solve the noise factor.
Okay, so the visual screening, it doesn't matter to you?
No, because I've got, they're probably 25-foot evergreens, hedgerow on that side, and the noise, busts right through those hedgerows.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Green?
I'm ready to make a motion if there are no other comments or questions.
Go for it.
I move that we approve the request with 3 conditions. One, that we remove the boarding and daycare verbiage under item 1. That we waive the 5-acre minimum requirement and allow this to be 4.5 acres. And then the third would be to waive the screening unless the property to the south develops into residential. Isn't that part of the staff comments or recommendations?
The waiving of the 5-acre requirement is, however, the waiving of the south screening requirement does not have the verbiage related to if it's going to be developed or not. So the verbiage of if it's going to be developed would be added as a condition for approval.
Yeah, and we want to include all the other staff recommendations. And the screening to the south would be within residential property within 300 feet.
I'd second that. We have a motion by Mr. Green, a second by Mr. Bill Johnson. Additional question or comments? Mr. Foster?
And the doggy daycare is excluded, correct?
Yeah, that was the first item that we would remove the boarding and daycare verbiage from item number 1, that it would not be allowed.
Seeing no further questions, those in favor of the motion signify with the upraised hand. Those opposed? 3. 11-3. Motion passes 11-3. We're going to move down to agenda item 4.7.
Dale Miller, planning staff. This case, as you may recall, was you heard previously, and it went to the Board of County Commissioners, and they voted to send it back for your reconsideration. It is 3.78 acres. It's currently zoned SF20, and they're requesting OW office warehouse zoning. The request is being made in order for them to establish a landscape and landscape maintenance business on the property. You heard this case on October 10th and recommended approval 11-0, subject to a protective overlay that, among other development standards, limited the site's use to uses permitted by right in the SF20 district, plus a landscape and nursery business. Staff later drafted the protective overlay to limit uses to those permitted in the SF20 district and a landscape and landscape maintenance business, because the applicant had indicated that they do not do retail sales and they don't conduct nursery sales on the property. So staff took the liberty of presenting a resolution to the county commission that we felt like more accurately reflected the intent of the motion of the planning commission to limit it to what this business proposes to do. The county commission reviewed this on November 20th and voted 4-1 to return it for your reconsideration. There were a number of criticisms and questions about the application and the staff report, and so I'm going to take a little bit of time to go through those so that it may eliminate the need to have a lot of back and forth later on with questions. Again, the language on the development standards in the staff report of the protective overlay clearly limit permitted uses to those permitted by right in the SF20 district, and the only OW use permitted is the landscape and landscape maintenance business. And so that's what staff is recommending in the revised staff report is that language. And it would also included a statement that all development standards of the OW district apply unless specifically modified by this PO. Another change that's proposed by staff to the conditions of approval are publication of the resolution authorizing the zone change shall not occur until all conditions of approval have been met. And we did that primarily after meeting with some of the neighbors that were concerned about the use, that they wanted to make sure that there was a site plan that was in compliance with all the development standards before the applicant would be allowed to operate the business. And so this way we can assure them that staff will receive and review a site plan that is in compliance with whatever development standards, if it is ultimately approved, apply. At the county commission meeting, the applicant indicated that they intend to pave the driveway, parking, and circulation aisles. And so we've added that as one of the conditions since they're applying that. And I want to make a clarification that vehicles that are being stored or other equipment that's being stored in the county, storage can be done on rock. So the storage area doesn't have to be paved with concrete or asphalt, but the driveway, parking, and circulation aisles would have to be paved under this condition as they volunteered. The site plan that includes required landscaping and screening has not been finalized. That was a concern from a number of folks. And I would refer you to item number 2, the protective overlay contained and still contains the requirement that a site plan consistent with the conditions be submitted within 30 days of approval. This is a standard delegation to MAPD staff and requires that MAPD staff would review and hold the application area to specified standards adopted within the zoning code. Also, as you know, it costs the applicant money every time a site plan or a landscape plan has to be modified. So staff accepts draft plans, and that's what you have received in your packet. It does not require a final site plan until after final approval and all the conditions are known, so that we can get a site plan that is consistent with whatever the approval requirements were. And for clarification, standard zoning code screening requires non-residential uses abutting residential zoning to provide solid screening along the side and rear lot lines. The screening has to be at least 6 feet tall and provide solid screening from ground level view. The code allows wooden fencing, berming, and/or landscaping, or some combination of the three. So in this instance, the code requires solid screening along the east and south property lines. Item 4 repeats the requirements that the site plan comply with zoning code requirements. Also, with respect to screening, it has been long-standing practice to count existing trees or fencing on abutting property to count towards the requirement unless or until the trees or the fencing on the adjoining property, if it were to go away, then the applicant is required to replace that and come into compliance with the approved site plan. That way we don't end up, if someone has a fence on one side, we don't have 2 fences back to back with an area in between that nobody can get to or maintain. With respect to outside storage, the OW district limits outside storage to merchandise as an accessory use, so only material or equipment used in the operation of the business can be stored outside. You cannot use parking or loading spaces for storage. The area used for outdoor storage cannot exceed 100% of the floor area of all buildings on the zoning lot. And items stored outside cannot be visible from any adjacent non-elevated street nor from ground level view from any adjacent lot. Item 3 of the recommended protective overlay requires a site plan to depict the location of outdoor storage and repeats the OW outdoor storage standards. As I mentioned earlier, we did meet with 2 or 3 of the concerned neighbors and their attorneys, and they brought up a concern about loose material being stored on site. And so we are recommending an addition that any material stored outdoors that could become runoff from rain or wind blown from the site should be contained in a manner that prevents leaching, runoff, or blowing from the site. So we've added that condition. Another item that came up at the county commission hearing was that the property located to the east of the application area here is owned by the city of Wichita and is supposed to be developed as a park. I talked with the city's property manager. He did receive the notice and is aware of the application, and I also talked with the city park director, and there are at present no funds budgeted to do anything with this land to convert it from anything from what it is today. And the deed, the warranty deed that they got, does not restrict it to parkland. It can be used for anything that the city council would desire, or county commission, whoever ultimately controls it at the time. And at this point, the planning staff has not received any objections from anybody in the city with respect to this application. The 4th item was that this case should be denied because it is spot zoning, and staff has prepared a graphic show all of the county zone changes that have occurred since 1985 when countywide zoning was adopted. And that's the color map, the big ledger size. Yeah, see, I think Jim got this in here, there. I won't go over this at this point because Justin has some comments about spot zoning and how maybe the Planning Commission would want to interpret that. But in general, what I was trying to show was that there's approximately 70 circles there, and within each one of those circles, there's at least one zone change. We did not include any conditional use applications. It was strictly zone changes. And it is staff's opinion that these zone changes were either from SF20 or RR zoning to whatever the current use is. And I think on the printed copy off to the side in teeny tiny letters, it shows you what the zoning is. But I'll let Justin speak more to that, but I did want to provide that to you. And finally, it was suggested that the applicant could operate the business as a rural home occupation. As staff understands the applicant's proposed business model, even though he has purchased the abutting lot, which is the house there that you can see in this slide, they have not committed to living there for an extended time. And so in order for this to be a rural home occupation, one of the first requirements is that the operator of the rural home occupation has to live on the site. And so the applicants are not committing to do that for an extended time. They also have more equipment in terms of vehicles than is typically permitted with a rural home occupation. And they have more than 4 employees, which is the maximum amount of employees allowed with a rural home occupation. And with that, I would then try and answer questions or turn it over to Justin to
Let's do this. Why don't you hang around and let Justin, and then also have Philip, if he's got anything to add, and then we'll just add staff questions all at one time.
Hello, Planning Commissioners. Justin Wagoner, Assistant County Counselor. As Dale mentioned, spot zoning came up from people who were opposed to the application, both the Planning Commission last time and at the County Commission. So I'm going to take a minute to discuss Kansas case law on spot zoning so you can have that at the outset as you analyze this during today's hearing. First, I just want to point out the most recent published and binding Kansas case law on spot zonings from 1974. It's the Dent versus Kansas City case. And I'll quote, I think what's the most essential part of the case. It says spot zoning, as usually defined, signifies a carving out of one or more properties located in a given use district and reclassifying them to a different use district. And the opinion later stated that spot zoning may be unreasonable and invalid when it singles out a small parcel of land for use classified differently from the surrounding area, primarily for the benefit of the owner of the property and to the detriment of the to the detriment of the area and other owners therein. On the other hand, spot zoning is not unreasonable and invalid if it is related to the general welfare and the best interests of the community at large. So there's a bit of a balancing test that you're tasked with on spot zoning analysis. It's also worth pointing out that case was from 1974. 4 years later is when the Golden decision came out from the Supreme Court of Kansas. And you're all familiar with the Golden factors and the analysis that they require you to undertake on zoning cases, the reasonableness of a use, as well as the appropriateness of that use. And those Golden factors really incorporated the spot zoning analysis that I just read you from that 1974 case. In terms of looking at the detriment to the neighbors, the benefit to the single property owner, and then also any benefit or detriment to the public at large as well. There have not been, as I mentioned before, there haven't been any published Kansas cases on spot zoning since 1974, but in 2003 there was an unpublished opinion, meaning it's not binding on Kansas courts, but it was on spot zoning in particular. That was the Orff v. Jackson County case from 2003, and that was a Kansas Court of Appeals case. They ended up analyzing spot zoning in that case, and they did utilize the Golden factors. So again, I'm going to suggest that you, in hearing this and considering this, analyze the Golden factors like you do on all your zoning cases. That case involved a zone change from neighborhood commercial to heavy industrial for the operation of a concrete plant. And next door to the concrete plant at least in the opinion, they talked about there's a restaurant and a bowling alley that were zoned neighborhood commercial as well. Essentially, the court's opinion in that case, which upheld the district court opinion, was that the county commission did not analyze to good enough degree under the golden factors on the spot zoning analysis, the impact that use of the concrete plant would have on those neighboring properties. That was key to the decision. Again, that's not binding, but I think it tells you how courts may analyze this. They did, again, look at the golden factors. They also think it's appropriate to consider, just briefly, how Kansas courts have analyzed public health, safety, and welfare. The Taco Bell v. City of Mission case from 1984 clarified that when you consider public health, safety, and welfare in zoning decisions, it must be remembered that the public is the community at large, not just the neighbors, although their wishes are also to be considered. So again, my recommendation on this would be to analyze the case under the golden factors. Under KSA 12757, when this is referred back to you, you can either resubmit your recommendation and state the reasons therefor, or you can change your recommendation. When you guys voted on this, and back in the last time that you heard it, you incorporated the staff recommendations and comments that did include an analysis of the golden factors. You could certainly do that again today. You could expand upon that or modify it as you would see fit. If you would end up changing your recommendation to recommend denial on this, I would suggest that you have corresponding findings to support any such denial, as those are not in the staff report. I'd be happy to answer any questions on this.
Let's hold on that. Philip, do you have anything to add to this presentation before we go for questions?
Not in any particular detail, other than I would call it to attention the small packet of information for Zone 2019-37. It includes a couple of things. One, the very top sheet was just a pulled out, updated version of the staff recommended language for a PO. So that differs from your staff report, as we had to get the staff report out in the mailing, and then we were able to discuss with not only some of the neighbors, but also the applicant, and came up with some additional language for it. So you have that. It has 7 points to it. In addition, there is a handout from Mr. Bob Kaplan, who is representing the applicants, and he will speak towards some recommended language that they have for potential restrictions on the property for the PO. I believe that as we work through this, we'll probably end up marrying the two if this is the will of the board. So I will let him speak towards this as to what their recommended language is for their PO. And finally, the last thing is an email correspondence that we did send out to all of you via email, but I provided it as a handout just in case some of you were not able to check your emails from last night or this morning once they were sent. Other than that, I don't have any more additional comment towards the case. Dale took pretty much the matters in terms of staff perspective, but I can stand for any questions, as I might have a little bit more detail in my conversations with the neighbors and the applicant themselves.
Okay, any questions for Justin, Dale, or Philip? Mr. Hartman?
I have one for Philip.
Yes,
Is
sir.
it possible to bring up the draft of their site plan? The one I have is so small I can't read it.
Yes. I believe we have it in here. I apologize for me. I apologize. I thought we had it in the show, but apparently we did not include it. That is our fault. I apologize. Again, it is just a draft, so it's definitely not binding. I can discuss it if you turn to the page of your staff report with the draft plan. You can see most of the trees in black are existing vegetation. The applicant is looking at extensively planting additional trees. Since the development of this draft site plan, I've had a significant conversation with the applicant as to what increase in vegetation needs to be required in order to create the solid screening effect that is required by the code. So they are understanding that this draft site plan that is before you is still insufficient, and that there is still more work that needs to be done on it. Is there a specific question you have about the site plan that I can answer?
Yeah, just looks like south of the building, it looks like maybe a graveled area. Is that for vehicles?
Correct. As of right
storage?
now, our understanding is that gravel area is where the outdoor storage would be. The paving requirement that is mentioned in our proposed language to the PO would be for the driveway, and then all of that area to the
To the west, the parking lot?
Yeah, so there's kind of a proposed driveway that comes like this.
Right.
And then there's the area to the west of the proposed building would all be subject to the paving requirement. Anything south of the building would be considered outdoor storage and can be an all-weather service.
What is the item just south of that gravel parking there? It looks like a line connecting and then like.
I believe it's their septic system.
Oh, okay.
But the applicants are here and they would be able to speak to that specifically.
Mr. Foster?
Philip, I'd like some clarification on the second set of protective overlay information you've got between item 5 and 11. It refers to landscaping material to be stored on the site, stored in bins. Well, landscaping material would oftentimes include plant materials. It seems to conflict with number 11. Is the intent that no plant materials be stored on site?
I believe it is, right. Actually, this set of information that you're, is submitted by the applicant, and it'd probably be better for them to clarify that.
Additional questions for staff? Question?
Sorry, Chairman, if I could I make one more comment, please?
Absolutely.
In talking with Scott Knable, he actually made the suggestion, and it's one that I think would make some sense. On the staff recommended conditions of approval that you received today, a slight amendment to condition 6 on that might be more appropriate to say publication of the resolution authorizing the zone change shall not occur until condition 4 has been completed or the site plan has been approved by planning department staff. There's a few conditions on there like paving and other things that it wouldn't make sense to have the zoning have to wait on those items to occur. So I think that's a slight change that planning staff and I would think could be appropriate in your consideration.
Appreciate that clarification.
Thank you.
Additional questions for staff? Mr. Richardson?
Got one for Dale. Dale, you mentioned screening on the south and the east. Would it not also be required on the west should that hedgerow come down for some reason?
Yes, I forgot it. I would keep thinking there's a street over there, but yeah, everywhere they abut residential zoning, they would have to, except for themselves. Yeah.
Thank you.
If there's no other questions for staff, I'll have the agent or applicant come forward, please.
Chair.
You need to take the thing out of your ear. The thing in your ear.
No, I don't need that.
Well, it's going to buzz. You need to pull it out and put it down.
Oh, feedback?
Yes. So just take the, yeah. And put it over here somewhere where, there.
That's fine. Fix it so I can't hear anything. Chair, Commissioners, Bob Kaplan, 1600 Epic Center. This is a remand, so there's no need to repeat what you've already heard, and I'm not going to do that. I basically am here to make one request. I was not at the County Commission meeting, so I reviewed the County Commission comments by reason of the County Commission minutes, and I extracted from those minutes some of the comments that were made by the commissioners. And to address those, I revised the protective overlay, and you have that. The staff did the same thing, so you have basically 2 protective overlays, which in my opinion address all the comments and satisfy any concerns that the county commissioners, any of them, brought up. My request is this: if you decide to approve this, and if there's a motion made for approval, then I would like to have that motion maker, by reference, include in the motion the 2 protective overlays. You don't have to go through and read them. We don't need to put them individually in the record. When you make your motion, if you elect to approve it, just simply say that your motion incorporates the protective overlays which have been submitted, and then they'll be in the record. And that's what the County Commission wants. In my opinion, the County Commission didn't have a lot of trouble with this case. They felt that it needed clarification. And that's basically what I did with my PO, and that's what caused staff to redo the PO. And the additional conditions are fine. Mr. Foster, those building materials stored on site are predominantly, going to be predominantly rock. What Premier does when they take a landscaping job, they have the landscaping material, the trees, whatever it is, directly delivered to the site of the job. They don't have them delivered to their facility and then load them up and take them out again. They send them directly to the job. But what they do have is rock, and that'll all be stored in bins. This is a very quality company, folks, and they do some very, very big jobs. And I think it's an appropriate place. So I suggested the only thing I want you to do is, if you approve it, is incorporate the POs, because that was the focus of the county commission meeting. That's about all we talked about. That's about all they talked about was the protective overlays. They did not think they were clear. And now I think they're very clear. So
Thank you,
with
Mr.
that, I
Pennell. Any
have,
questions for the speaker?
unless there are questions.
Mr. Hartman?
Does your overlay address storage of, I think it was branches and broken limbs and stuff that they
Yeah,
would store
well-
in metal containers to be hauled off?
They took my ears away. Are you talking about the storage? Yeah, Bill, do you want to come up here? My understanding is that the storage is predominantly rock. We're not going to have plant materials on site. But this gentleman knows more about his business than I do.
Thank you. Will Stulsatz, 8217 East Tamarack. As far as the waste, it would go in dumpsters and then would be removed.
So you would have metal dumpsters on site for waste removal, but
Correct.
those would be carted off. They wouldn't be stored on site.
Correct.
Additional questions for the applicants? Mr. Foster?
Will, since you're up there, I do want to get some clarification on number 5 and number 11. My experience is that landscape contractors will on occasion have a little bit of plant material left over or something like that, and they take it back to their shop, which is fine. But I just don't want to see you get saddled that you can't take any plants or anything back to the business here, and that's what concerns me about having that particular condition in there. I mean, does that happen on occasion?
It does. We currently have a small pad where we keep that stuff. If it would suit, we could put it inside of a storage container temporarily and then dispose of it when it's not used in a timely manner.
Okay, thank you.
Additional question for the applicants? Seeing none, thank you, gentlemen. Anybody from the audience wish to speak on this issue, please come forward, state your name and address for the record, and you will have 3 minutes.
My name is Bill Giles, and I'm here on behalf of the Lee Banks Living Trust, property owner immediately to the east of the subject parcel. The comment made about the 11 by 17 color map that's been given to you by the director, showing as many as 70 different locations of spot zoning.
Sir, could you speak in the microphone, please, just to
Yes,
make
sir.
sure we can hear? Appreciate that.
I can hear myself, I'm sorry,
Okay.
through the speakers. That map happens to show, as the director said, maybe as many as 70 different locations of spot zoning. We're not in question about spot zoning. We're in question about the egregious example that this particular proposed zoning change is. It's going from single-family 20 residential zoning to a commercial zoning of OW. 12 steps, 12 districts increase in intensity of use in order to accommodate one specific use within the OW, and then negating everything else that the OW allows and go back and allow only what is allowed in the current zoning. We're going all the way out there to allow the applicant's use, but any other use is only what's allowed in the SF20. This is a 100% benefit to the applicant at the detriment to the area owners and occupants, and we see little to no benefit for the public good. The location is historically and current and is forecasted to be residential to 2035, and we know that in this area there is advancing regular residential development all around us, and we see that trend is likely to continue and without giving any credence to the future, we're only looking at the present, there will be continued residential development closer and closer and all around, depending on what the city ends up doing with their property. This land use is incompatible with the existing uses as well as the likely future residential development that is already continuing to be moving in this direction. The description that this is a example of agricultural use, akin to agricultural use, is not correct. The intensity of the operation day after day after day of this business is not in line at all with the infrequency of actual farming operations. The attempt to use the protective overlay it fails as an excuse to change this zoning. It does not protect the interests of the surrounding property owners and occupants of the other properties. We've attempted to bring forth some issues, and we've tried to address typical issues of dust and smoke and odors and noise and light pollution, to which all of them have gotten no ability to do anything in the protective order. But again, the protective order is a false excuse to allow this zoning to occur. That's enough. Thank you.
Any questions for the speaker? Seeing none, thank you, sir. Next speaker, please.
My name is J.D. Munley. I live at the 14516 East Pawnee. It is on the northeast corner of 143rd Street in Pawnee. I'm apparently just outside the notification area, so I was not aware of the first hearing that you all had, or I would have been here, and I also would have filed a protest. I really believe that, and this was what I addressed the county commission about, when people go out and spend a heck of a lot of money on a piece of property to live at, I think we should have a reasonable expectation that if you look at the county and how they're going to do stuff, and it says that something's going to be zoned residential for the next 30 years, we ought to be able to expect that. And this is nowhere near that. There's other areas within 2 miles that are zoned commercial that these guys could be locating in. And to change something from residential, clear to warehouse, I don't think that's fair. I mean, we bought property, it was zoned residential, it should stay that way. Thank you.
Questions for the speaker? And thank you, sir. Next speaker, please.
Thank you. My name is Matthew Holcomb. I'm an attorney at Hinkle Law Firm, and I'll be speaking today on behalf of both of my clients who are here, Chris and Jennifer Lett. They reside at 14900 East Pawnee, which is just across the street north, and then a little bit to the west of this property. First of all, I want to thank you for your time reconsidering this today, and as an attorney, I'm going to do my best not to get down and bore you in the legal weeds, but there are some legal issues and factors that I think are very important for your consideration, especially when viewed in the context of the concerns that my clients have and the others have that you've heard from today. Certainly, my clients would request that this zoning be denied and specifically refer to it as spot zoning. And I say spot zoning because I agree with the comments of the attorney before me that generally spot zoning is carving out or singling out a property that's not zoned one way for use of another way in which it's not zoned. And I do think that's what's happened here, and that's why we have the level of concern that we have. We have land that is SF20 zoned, and it fits that definition. And there's a concern of what precedent this sets for other owners that may want the same or perhaps even greater degrees of change in their land in the future. So I have 3 questions that I'd like to ask and considerations for you to ponder. First, is this proposed OW use substantially different than what it's presently zoned for? I think the answer is clearly yes. We have a staff report that describes it as, quote, landscape and landscape maintenance services and equipment typically used in the operation of such a business. But questions that I think are important for this committee's consideration is what type of equipment are we talking about? What equipment is typically used? How large of it? How much is it? If we have a fleet of 10 trucks today, what's the fleet size 15 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? What happens when the fleet's 50 trucks and the trailers are 50? This is why we have such a great disparity between SF20 and OW. There's a reason for that. And so we believe that the description is broad and ambiguous, and it results in a great disparity. The second question I would ask this commission to consider in the context of spot zoning is does the proposed zoning benefit a single owner? I think it clearly does. And to the extent a change in zoning is a benefit at all, it benefits only the applicant, which is pretty important. And then the third factor is, does that benefit to the applicant, is it at the expense of others? And I think the clear answer is yes. You've heard that. You've heard the concerns that I don't want to repeat and go into detail, but there's concern of the visual aspect, the odor aspect. There's pesticides, herbicides, sprays, and chemicals of various types.
Sir, your time has expired.
Request for 2 additional minutes.
I'll yield to the committee. I'm not going to grant it because we've got such a long agenda. Seeing no motion, thank you.
We stand for any questions. Thank you.
Any questions? Seeing none, next speaker, please.
My name is Paul B. Harrison. I reside at 1125 North Linden Circle. My wife and I, Carolyn, own the 80 acres directly north of this property. It was purchased at some expense, planning to be part of our retirement. Converting this single-family property to commercial use will have a significant detrimental impact on the value of our property, and for our retirement, it would be no different than a stock market crash. I implore you not to allow this zoning change. Thank you.
Any questions for the speaker? Seeing none, thank you, sir. Next speaker, please. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the applicant for a 2-minute rebuttal.
As I've said before, don't count the time in transit. That'll take 2 minutes.
We'll give you half credit for that, Mr. Kaplan.
You know, most of you have been around this a long time, and I've been around this a long time. I know my land use. I really do. It is not spot zoning. There is no impairment to adjoining properties. Spot zoning is not simply the fact that you have one property which is differently zoned than another property. There's got to be some impairment. There's got to be some tying arrangement where it affects adversely these adjoining properties. This is not spot zoning. As far as being legal issues, you're not to make legal determinations. We have a court for that. Folks want to go to court and appeal a decision that's favorable to the applicant. They have every right to do that. There's really no evidence to support these complaints about light and water. There's nothing in the record whatsoever. You've heard this twice now. The county commission's heard it once. These folks have had their say about 3 times, and there's nothing different or new that you didn't already hear before. Now, I don't know if Bill's got anything to add to that.
I was just going to answer any questions.
Any questions for the applicants? Mr. Foster?
Yes, sir.
If you would describe the traffic issue in terms of people and coming and going, how many employees and that kind of thing, just describe what would happen traffic-wise.
Sure. Employees arrive typically between 7 and 5. However, or 7 o'clock in the morning. However, most of them go directly to a job site. They don't come to the building, the shop. The few that do would probably be from 7 to 5 p.m. Okay. Currently, we employ about 15 to 35, depending on the season. So during the winter, it's very low. As far as the cars in and out, you would see a few in the morning and probably a few in the afternoon. Of course, everybody has something going in and out their driveway every day, so.
Additional questions for the speakers? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the committee for action. Mr. McKay.
Question, staff. Bob mentioned his overlay configuration with yours. You agree with?
Yes, in fact, if someone is wanting to make a motion to approve it, what I would suggest is that we use Bob's version and that the item number 5, we would add staff's number 3 to it, and item number 6, we would add staff's number 2 to it. Is that? And otherwise, if you wanted to make a motion to approve it using the applicant's recommended PO.
Additional questions? Mr. Foster.
If that PO is utilized, I would suggest altering item 11 and strike the latter part of the sentence. Just simply say no retail sales will be permitted, period.
Okay, is that a motion?
I just want to enter that for discussion and make sure it's in there.
Mr. McKay.
I'll make a motion approval and add the language that Dale was just talking about on the PO.
Include the language that Mr. Foster?
And with Mr. Foster, yes.
Okay. Staff, got a clear understanding of that? Does everybody have an understanding of the motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. McKay, a second by Mr. Green. Any further discussion? Mr. Foster.
Would there be a suggestion from staff that we address issues related to the golden factors?
I think it would be worth, pointing out that the staff report already includes an analysis of the golden factors. I think if the motion maker and the second would like to clarify if they're adopting and incorporating staff comments, including the golden factor analysis, I think that could thoroughly and clearly.
Is it necessary?
I'll suggest it.
Okay, add it to it then.
And I'll second that.
Motion has been updated and the second concurs. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by the up raised hand. Those opposed? 1, 2, 3. 11-3. Next item, please. I think that would be for item 4.3. City conditional use to allow outdoor vehicle and equipment sales.
Good afternoon again. Philip Zievenbergen with planning staff. Item 4.3 is a conditional use request for outdoor vehicle sales on a property zone limited commercial located on the northeast corner of South Meridian and West Harry, as you can see here on the zoning map. The property is currently undeveloped and doesn't have an address. The property has 2 drive accesses that you can see here on the aerial. There's one right here. There's one that's kind of bleeds in with the alley on the east side of the property. It has paved areas on either side of kind of a planted area, grass area with a tree. Kind of a misnomer is that it's somehow connected to this property to the north. The properties are owned separately. This property to the north is an abandoned apartment building. As we were corrected at the district advisory board, it is not habited at this point. The applicant has submitted a site plan that you can see that shows that there would be customer parking on the east side with access from the alley. They would close the driveway on the east side, and there'd be employee parking. They would also construct a 10 by 6 foot office with a restroom, and they would have 6 display vehicles on the north side of the property. The Unified Zoning Code does permit outdoor vehicle sales in the limited commercial zoning district. subject to supplemental use regulations that, for the sake of time, I'm not going to go into. They're the standard regulations regarding no noise amplification, restrictions on signage related to portable and flashing signs or banners, things of that nature. Something to make note of is that the property on the north side of the building, this is the subject property you're looking directly at. This is that abandoned apartment building. Based on the proximity to the property line that this was built, there's about a 2 to 3 foot sidewalk between this building and the property line between the lots. Staff is recommending a 5 foot setback for this 6 by 10 foot office building. In the limited commercial zoning district, it does allow a 0 foot setback on interior side lots or side property lines. Because of the proximity of this building, we would invoke a 5 foot setback on the side yard, which is in compliance with the code as well. It says either 0 or 5 feet, just to give more spacing in between those buildings. Properties on the north, like I said, is LC and the abandoned motel. Property to the south, which is, you can't see here, it's this building here. It's a drinking establishment. It has a conditional use for a nightclub. Property to the east, which you're looking straight out ahead across